My name is Biff Barnard. I'm the Director of Institutional Advancement at URI, the United Religions Initiative. URI is the largest grassroots interfaith peace-building organization in the world. More on URI a bit later. URI is a proud partner of the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation and Launching Leaders. So I'm particularly honored to have been asked to talk about my personal experiences to emphasize how important it is to work hard at whatever your endeavors are and to establish and be true to life values that are important to you to enable you to maximize your potential and be the person that you want to be. So this is a story of my career in business and ultimate journey to URI and interfaith peace building. I'm a fourth-generation Californian born in San Francisco in 1945. I was raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, but my family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, outside of New York City in 1959. I attended a boarding high school in Connecticut, the Taft School. I didn't know anyone in Greenwich, so Taft really became more of a home to me. It was where all my friends were. I had a fabulous experience at Taft. I learned how to work hard and study smart. I was also active in sports and took on leadership roles in student activities and in student government. Taft's motto is not to be served, but to serve, which got me to thinking at an early age what kind of person I wanted to be. After graduating from Taft, I attended Stanford University in the San Francisco, California Bay Area. The study skills I learned at Taft prepared me well for the rigors of the Stanford education. I was able to balance academics with extracurriculars, again taking on leadership roles in student activities on campus and in my fraternity, and beginning to live the values that had begun to develop at Taft. I had learned a lot and had many great experiences both in the classroom and out of the classroom, and made many lasting friendships at both Taft and Stanford. But graduating from college in 1967 in the midst of the Vietnam War and a very aggressive draft into the military made it very difficult to plan a career. But a unique opportunity developed for me. As a senior at Stanford, I had been on a committee that worked closely with the Stanford Annual Fund staff, raising money from local merchants for a class gift. And in doing so, I developed a friendship with the head of the Stanford Annual Fund staff. Knowing that I was dealing with the draft and thinking, who better to work on fundraising for Stanford than a recent active graduate, he asked me to join the annual fund staff. Caring deeply for Stanford and wanting to do a great job, I worked very hard and had good success, raising more money in my areas of responsibility than had ever been raised there before. In addition to being introduced to the fundraising profession, my job on the annual fund staff was a good transition for me from being a student to becoming a professional, and I continued on a path of service. Even back then, Stanford had a very sophisticated fundraising organization, and as a result of my experience there, I was recruited by Taft to become head of its annual fund, as well as to teach, coach, live in the dorm, and be an advisor to students. After my first year in those roles at Taft, I became its director of development, in charge of all of its fundraising and public relations. It was the late 1960s and the early 1970s, and the Vietnam War was raging. It was a confusing time. Drugs were being used increasingly by young people, and there was a disconnect between young people and their parents and the school faculty. I was 25. I understood the young people's issues as well as the perspective of their parents and the faculty. I became the bridge builder, helping students, their parents, and faculty better understand and communicate with each other. And I learned some interesting lessons. Teachers often forget that they were once students. Parents often forget that they were once children. And later in life, I learned that business managers often forget that they were once employees. I wasn't a great classroom teacher, but I was pretty good at teaching life. The importance of trust, honesty, compassion, hard work, respect, and service to others. Values that are very important to me, values I have worked hard at living into. Helping young people address the confusing issues of the time helped me to deepen the values that are important to me, and I developed deep bonds with many of the Taft students. In fact, I have stayed in touch with and consider myself to be good friends today with many of my students of 50 years ago. Friendships are very important to me. I've always worked hard at being a good friend, a quality that has served me well. After 3 years on the faculty at Taft, I returned to California to join two friends who were starting a restaurant company. We opened a restaurant in Lafayette, California, backed by two successful real estate developers. We later merged with two other restaurants groups they had backed, and we grew the company, expanding nationwide, and eventually sold to Stouffer's Hotels. With the Stouffer's financial resources, we continued to expand, probably growing too fast. We loved running restaurants. You become part of the community. You get to know your customers, and they get to know you. But the company got too big. We lost that sense of being part of communities, and it was no longer fun. Most of the founders left the company to go our separate ways. There is a real art to running any retail business, and restaurants are the most difficult. We were very good at it because we lived the values I talked about earlier, and we provided great service to our customers and took great care of our employees. In the early 1980s, two other friends were forming a non-bank lending company, lending money to small businesses using the loan guarantee program of the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA. They asked me to join them to help them raise money and to assist in managing the company. I soon became chairman of the board and its CEO, and we grew the company to become the largest SBA lender in the Northern California area. We sold the company to a multi-billion-dollar finance company headquartered in Chicago, but our management team continued to grow the company. With the financial resources of our new owner, in 3 years, we grew the company from 5 offices in California to 15 offices in 5 states and doubled the loan volume each of those 3 years. As with the restaurant company, we were successful because we lived the values I talked about earlier: trust, honesty, compassion, hard work, respect, and service. And we took great care of our customers and of our employees. And the culture we had created was like a bunch of friends working together. It was fun. But like with the restaurant company, it got too big and bureaucratic. It was no longer fun. And I was not good at working with a large corporation that did not share those values that had become so important to me. After 15 years, I left the company to explore other opportunities. During my time in the SBA lending business, I founded and ran the SBA Lending Trade Association, testifying before Congress and successfully lobbying for increased funding and more private sector lender autonomy and authority. To a great extent, because of the work we began, the SBA Loan Guarantee Program is still thriving today, providing much needed financing for growing small businesses. Also during this time, I was asked to join the Business Advisory Council of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, where I served for 9 years, including 3 years as the council's chair. We brought to Fed policymakers practical, on-the-ground perspectives of the issues businesses face. Because of my experience growing small businesses, I was asked to open an office in San Francisco for a Washington, D.C.-based investment company, providing equity and subordinated debt to growing middle-market companies nationwide. 5 years later, I was recruited to join a growing Los Angeles-based private equity and subordinated debt fund, where I served as managing director for 5 years, again investing in and lending to middle-market companies nationwide. With a growing family, though, and seeking to reduce my travel, I decided to move from the principal side of the investment business to the advisory side, where I could capitalize on my experience founding, managing, lending to, and investing in middle-market companies. With a partner, we founded our own investment banking firm, focused on advising mostly Northern California middle-market non-tech firms. We operated the firm for 10 years until I joined URI, which I will talk about in a minute. Young people beginning their careers often ask me to share my career path with them. I chuckle and say that I'm not really a very good role model. I didn't really have a career path. What I did have was a very strong work ethic and values that I carried through my life: trust, honesty, compassion, hard work, respect, and service of others. Friendship, being a good friend, is also very important to me. I developed and have worked hard to maintain deep and lasting friendships from all the different parts of my life. I've never really looked for a job, but I created opportunities that capitalized on what I had learned, what I was good at, and what I liked doing. Opportunities that I thought would be fun, interesting, and rewarding. There's one more phase of my career that I want to tell you about, because it seems that everything I have done has prepared me uniquely for what I am now doing. I'd always thought that my nonprofit focus would be Taft and Stanford, both great institutions where I had great experiences. But I came to the realization that I couldn't make a difference at either. So I began seeking a nonprofit where I could make a difference, a nonprofit that was making a difference in the world. Anything to do with religion was nowhere on my radar screen. Then, by total happenstance, I was introduced to Bishop William Swing, at the time the Episcopal Bishop of California at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and who had recently founded URI. URI was 3 years old, and as Bishop Swing told me about its founding, it was clear to me that it would need assistance in fundraising, where I had had lots of experience. And it was also clear that URI was going to make a difference in the world. I indicated to the bishop that I wanted to learn more. A short time later, after our introduction, he invited me to a meeting of a group of people working on some strategic planning for URI. The group was comprised of some of the most respected business and philanthropic leaders in San Francisco, many of whom I knew and respected. I thought to myself, if these people are the kind of people who are involved with URI, there has to be something to it. After attending several of these strategic planning meetings and showing a sincere interest in getting involved, Bishop Swing invited me to the first meeting of URI's Global Council in Seoul, South Korea. The Global Council is URI's board of directors, comprised of 32 community leaders from around the world, from many different religions, spiritual expressions, and indigenous traditions. I jumped at the opportunity. At the Seoul meeting, I had the opportunity to meet and begin to get to know these amazing people of URI. I heard time and time again, URI has changed my life. It is changing my community, and it will change the world. After that experience, I told Bishop Swing that I was all in. That was the beginning of a 12-year journey as a member of what we call the President's Council at URI, an advisory group of business and philanthropic leaders that was the outcome of the initial strategic planning group. During that time, I took a very active role in URI, traveling around the world, meeting and getting to know the amazing people of URI, and assisting in advisory and fundraising capacities. Almost 4 years ago, in anticipation of entering into a significant fundraising campaign, including establishing a meaningful endowment so that URI can have the financial resources to sustain itself into the future, Bill Swing and URI's executive director asked me to join the staff as URI's first director of institutional advancement, leading the fundraising campaign, forming partnerships with like-minded global organizations, and bringing some business perspective and experience to URI's management team. The job description they presented to me outlined what was an ideal position for my last endeavor. I told my wife that if someone had asked me to write the ideal job description for me for the last part of my life, building on everything I had done, this was it. I jumped at the opportunity and retired after 40 years in business to join URI full-time. I have never had more fun or done anything more rewarding. As I mentioned at the beginning, URI today is the largest grassroots interfaith peace-building organization in the world, Core to what we do is what we call a cooperation circle, comprised of at least 7 people from at least 3 different religions or beliefs that undertake community action projects on issues that impact their communities. Issues such as conflict resolution and reconciliation, environmental sustainability, education, women's and youth programs, and advocacy for human rights. In doing so, Cooperation Circle members develop trusting personal relationships that enable them to accept each other without regard for each other's religions and beliefs. Today, there are almost 1,100 local cooperation circles with more than 1 million members in 108 countries around the world, impacting the lives of an estimated 50 million people annually. With all my experiences and the values that have been part of my life, I feel that I'm making a unique difference at URI, an organization that is making a difference in the world. What I am doing at URI is very satisfying and the culmination of all that came before. So that's my story. And my message to you is be proactive in thinking about what kind of person you want to be and developing and living values that will enable you to be that person. The rest will take care of itself. I hope that this Launching Leaders program and the story of my journey help motivate you to rise above and make a difference. Thank you for listening. I hope that your life is as gratifying for you as mine has been for me.